You might be familiar with the name Kristen Worley. She is the first athlete in the world to submit to the International Olympic Committee's gender verification process, and the same woman who took on the IOC and won. Kristen is now sharing her story in Woman Enough: How a Boy Became a Woman and Changed the World of Sport. It is a candid exploration of what it looks like to embrace your true self. We welcome Kristen Worley into our studios this morning. Kristen, thank you so much for being here.
Kelsey, it's a pleasure to be here this morning.
So I want to start first with your story. You talk about, in your book, you had to learn who Chris Jackson was before you could really introduce yourself to Kristen Worley. So who was Chris Jackson?
That's a great question. It was a person I once knew. It was a young person who went through a series of issues of identity from a very small age, a very young age. I was a young person who originally was conceived and came from New Zealand through my birth mother back in the mid-'60s, and then was adopted here in Canada. So I went through a journey being adopted into a Canadian middle-class family, a sporting family, and a conservative family. And particularly at that particular point in time, we didn't understand gender. We didn't understand the broader diversities back in those days that we do today. So it was a journey that I had to take on my own.
As Chris, you married a woman named Allison. You were married for 18 years, 11 before you transitioned, and 7 afterwards. And you write in the book, Allie jokes, but isn't joking, that she married a man, raised a teenager, and ended up with a wife. By teenager, she's referring to hormonal changes. For the first few years, she had to keep reminding herself how she'd felt as a teenager, and that I was basically hormone soup. You say she's your angel.
Absolutely.
What is that relationship like?
The relationship exists today. She is now my stepsister. That's the way within the Worley family. It was really the relationship I had with Allison. We met back in our early teens, and it was a relationship, a bond, a friendship that had tremendous authenticity, and also allowed me to be the person I needed to be, which I hadn't experienced as Kristen, and allowed me to experience my diversity. And learning about love, learning about compassion, and honesty, and that was the things I was missing in my life at that particular point in time. And the Worley family and their embrace of me personally, it firstly saved my life.
Kristen, a huge part of your story is sport, of course. It seems like it was a refuge, must have been a refuge for you growing up. And when we talk about sport, I mean, there's everything. There's running, skiing, specifically cycling. You ended up filing a complaint against the International Olympic Committee, and you won. So tell us what you went after them for.
Well, at the time, I was back in the early 2000s. There's a policy set up by the International Olympic Committee, which stated, which I was the first athlete, let alone in the world, let alone in the sport of cycling, to go through, where I went through a process of gender verification with associations to members in the Canadian sports system aligned with the international bodies of sport in Europe. And what I was able to do early on in my cycling career was that through my transition, we learned, based on the policies of the IOC, that my body started to fail me because I didn't have the hormonal capacity to manage and metabolize my body to ensure the health of my body. So the IOC had shown, which I tried over a period of a decade, to illustrate to the Canadian sports system, let alone the international sports system, right up to the heads of the IOC, to say there is no science and policies to the policies that they're bringing in through the Olympic movement, under the Olympic Charter, which Canada is one of the nations of the 206 nations under the Olympic movement, to accept these policies, virtually carte blanche, suggesting that there's policies towards this, allowing young women to be violated through gender verification, to which there is no science. So what this is doing is, what was really important, and the reasons why I brought it to the human rights level. First of all, it became a human rights case, not because of the fact that I deserved to compete. I had to prove the sciences to the IOC, World Cycling, which is UCI, and to the Canadian sporting system, which I can tell you they were all deer in headlights. They did not understand when they first came into court why it was a human rights issue. They saw it as a sporting issue, but once we were able to illustrate clearly the issues, clearly understand why it was a human rights issue, because what they're doing a private entity in Switzerland is now overriding international laws within Canada, using that as an example, under the Olympic movement, in protections of young people and athletes. And the autonomy, it's under the autonomy of sport, to which the IOC, when they were here in court in Toronto, outside of the Court of Arbitration, is that their biggest concern was that they were feeling that they would lose the autonomy of sport. And that's which they control and manage sport worldwide.
Kristen, I'm so thankful that you came in today, and I wish we had so many more minutes to continue this conversation. But
absolutely.
People can get your book, Woman Enough, and continue the story there. So thank you for coming in.
Fabulous. Thank you very much.